I think we might just start off first with let's have a chat about the next 6 weeks. Here is a breakdown of the studio overview. So what we'll be doing. Obviously today is week 1, Monday class. It will be an online class only. So the only online class you'll have is actually today. Next week in week 2, it's actually broken up into 2 activities. On the same Monday, we have a SolidWorks training session. So SolidWorks is the use of a computer-aided design program, which everybody has available on Workspace UTS. Now, I know that I've got some questions about Workspace UTS. It is an online portal. You have to log in via your student ID, and it takes you straight to SolidWorks and other programs that you might need during your engineering degree. Now, in week 2, we've got the SolidWorks on Monday, but then on Wednesday, we also go to the PC Hive Lab. So here, on the left here, you can see the PC2 Hive Lab. So that's whereby we're going to get everybody to actually run a PCR reaction. We're going to work with a virus known as HPV16, the same virus that I talked about just a couple of minutes ago, and you'll be detecting some genes from that virus. So the overall aim for week 2 is that so everyone can get an understanding of how PCR diagnostic works, and then you can use that knowledge in terms of designing your own point-of-care device in terms of using SolidWorks. And then we'll be continuing that SolidWorks in week 3 as well. Again, another evening class from 6 to 9. Now, week 4 and 5, this is when we get you back into the lab, into a mechanical lab or an electrical lab. I'll send out the lab location a week or 2 before. It is an evening class as well. It runs from 6 to 9. And then into those 2 sessions, which 4 and 5, you'll be actually building a component of the PCR machine. That component is known as the Peltier block. And that controls the temperature regulation of the PCR device, allowing it to go up or allowing it to ramp down to a lower temperature. Now, in week 6, what we have is we have the final presentations. So part of your assessments for this studio, which I'll go on to explain in the next couple of slides, is that you need to work in teams, develop your own particular point-of-care device, such as a mini PCR in relation to a stakeholder that you have chosen. So now, what do I mean by group presentation? So what you can see on the right-hand side there, that's what you can do in SolidWorks. SolidWorks is a fantastic program where you can model a lot of your builds, both in 2D and also in 3D here as shown. So what's shown on the right-hand side is an animation SolidWorks, and it's the construction of a Peltier block, which everyone will be doing in weeks 4 and 5. And part of your assessment also for this particular module is to use SolidWorks and to create a very similar animation to what you're seeing there on the right-hand side. Now, the group presentation works like this. You have to form yourself into teams. I think the best number of teams is usually about three people or so. If you can't form yourself in teams, let me know. I'll place you in teams, so that's not a problem. Now, working in teams in parallel to what we're going to teach you in the lab, in both the Hive lab and also in the mechanical electrical labs and SolidWorks, the idea is that you have to select a stakeholder. So what I mean by that is, let's say you choose a stakeholder to design your mini PCR device. So, for example, if I chose a farmer to be my stakeholder, what type of considerations would I have to think about in designing this mini PCR prototype for the farmer? For example, it has to be waterproof. How am I going to take power supply to the unit? Is the farmer going to be using the PCR device out in the field? And how am I going to solve all those related problems? So you go in with your team running parallel to all the other activities that we've come up with you. You have to select the stakeholder and think about the mini PCR design that you'll be doing for that particular stakeholder. So we did, let me just move this out here. So there are extra marks that you can gain by this as well. So a lot of groups last year, what they did was, even though they just built the SolidWorks model, they really tried to encase this particular Peltier unit into a casing. So if you decided, for example, that you want to build an entire casing to house this Peltier device, then by all means go ahead and you can earn yourself some extra marks for that. Now, so here is the actual build. So like I said, we've got the online class today. Next week is SolidWorks and the Hive labs. Then weeks 4 and 5 we'll get you back into the electrical lab and you'll be building this very simple PCR device. So the PCR device is actually just an instrument which allows you to regulate the temperature very accurately. So like I said before, it allows you to ramp up to around about 110 degrees, then it allows you to ramp down again back to 4 degrees. So what you can see here is a very simple makeup of that particular heating system. What we do use is something known as a Peltier block here. So if you can follow all the leads around, the Peltier block gets hooked up to a motor driver. There's an RDD click, which is involved in measuring the temperature. There's a breadboard, which will get you to use as well. And there's also a mini Arduino. So some of these elements are very similar to what you'll be building. All the instructions and also a video of the build are actually posted on Canvas. So if you want to, just go ahead, go to week 4 and 5, look at the build, familiarize yourself with the manual, and also check out the video before we start that particular class in week 4 and also week 5. So we've got the presentation as well. Another assessment that we brought in just specifically for this was the reflective journal. And what I mean by this is that the journal comprises of artifacts or reflections which can be reviewed regularly during your teaching or learning period. So what I mean by that is that each week, we would ask you to write in your journal to discuss your learning in regards to the subject learning outcomes, what you've done within your group, what have you learned, and it's a reflection on how you've been going through the last 6 weeks. For me personally, I think it's a very powerful tool, reflection. It's been used a lot in industry to help people improve their productivity and also to guide them in making the right decisions. Like I said, it is a personal reflective journey there. So only myself will be reading out. You can put artifacts into your journal as well. What I mean by that is that you can use photos, emails, messages, etc., just to demonstrate what you've been learning in the last 6 weeks for this particular module. Now, the really good thing about the reflective journal is that you can really identify strengths and weaknesses. By being reflective, it also allows you to build a plan and also resets your thinking on certain problems. So my advice to everybody is to do your weekly entries. Okay, so set it out. I have put some examples of some really good reflective writing in Canvas, so have a look at that. But my advice to you is to have weekly entries which then address your subject learning outcomes for that particular week.